Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 13 January 2018. Now let us begin. Now we begin from page 1. Now as you might be aware of the recent press conference of the 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court after the Chief Justice of India, and this news has been carried forward onto page 8, page 9 and also on the editorial page. Now obviously controversy is not a preview of the UPSC examination syllabus. So what we would do is first understand why is it in the news. And then we move forward to understanding the powers and functions of the Chief Justice of India in allocating cases to different benches, on how the roster is prepared in the Supreme Court, and finally end with the Supreme Court judgment on the roster case. So now let us start with first understanding why is it in the news. Now the 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court after the Chief Justice of India held a press conference and expressed their anguish about the selective allocation of cases to benches of Supreme Court. So in other words, it means which judge will decide which case. Now in this respect, let us understand the powers and functions of the Chief Justice of India to allocate cases to different benches and other matters pertaining to the administration and day-to-day affairs of the Supreme Court. Now Article 145 of the Constitution of India mentions about the rules of court, and it says that the Supreme Court, with the approval of the President, may make rules for regulating the practice and procedure of the court. Now on this basis, let us understand the allocation of bench. Now in case of a division bench, so in a division bench, any matter heard by a division bench of not less than 2 judges shall be nominated by the Chief Justice of India. Now with regards to the Constitution bench, now in a Constitution bench, a CJI may constitute a Constitution bench consisting of 5 or more judges under the following conditions. If it involves a question of law under Article 145 Part 3 or any reference made under Article 143, which is the power of the President to consult the Supreme Court. Now hopefully up till here you have understood why is it in the news. How is Article 145 important with reference to this news? How the benches are allocated in the Supreme Court, and how the allocation of the division bench is different from the allocation of a constitution bench. Now let us understand the preparation of roster under the Supreme Court rules. Now the roster shall be prepared by the Registrar of the Supreme Court under the orders of the Chief Justice of India. Now this roster has 2 allocative features. Now the first feature is that the general or special instructions regarding assignment or allocation of work to a particular bench. The second feature that the roster contains is that it includes allocation of work of a bench on account of non-availability to another bench. So it means that if one bench is not available, then the roster would allocate that work to another bench. The third feature is that to meet contingencies, CJI may instruct the registrar to reallocate judicial work. The fourth and the last feature is that in case of transfer of cases from one bench of judges to another bench, then the registrar shall place such listing before CJI for approval. It means that even if a case has to shift from one bench to another bench, then the approval of the CJI is needed. Now hopefully up till here, you've understood the preparation of a roster, who is it prepared by, how is it controlled by the Chief Justice of India, and what are the 4 special instructions or features that it contains. Now in the final part, let us understand the recent judgment on the roster case. Recently in a 5-judge Constitution bench, which was headed by the Chief Justice of India, Deepak Mishra, held that the CJI is the master of the roster. And further, the Chief Justice of India said that it was the exclusive domain of the Chief Justice of India and no other can allocate cases in the Supreme Court. Now hopefully you have also understand the recent roster case. Now with all of this which has been explained, you would be able to understand the controversy and also understand the specifics which would be useful in your UPSC examination. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 2. Now before understanding as to why Khandamal Turmeric is in the news, let us understand as to where is Khandamal and what is turmeric. Now the Khandamal district is located in Orissa as shown here in this image. While turmeric is a spice which is also known as haldi in Hindi, and the Khandamal district has been producing a particular type of haldi or turmeric. Now let us understand as to why this is in the news and as to what is a GI tag. Now let us understand as to why the Khandamal turmeric is in the news. Now the Odisha government had applied for a GI tag on Khandamal turmeric. Now this application for a GI tag was accepted by the GI registrar. Now hopefully you understand as to why is it in the news. Now let us understand what is a GI tag. Now GI stands for Geographical Indication. Now GI tag is a sign used on products, and these products have a specific geographical origin and possess a unique quality and an identity of reputation. Now the GI tag in India was formed under the Geographical Indications of Goods Registration and Protection Act in 1999. And this GI tag is administered by the Controller General of Patents, Designs and Trademarks and is also known as the Registrar of GI. Now hopefully up till here you have understood as to what is a GI tag, what are the three specific conditions of a product to get a GI tag, on how the GI tag was formed and who is it administered by. Now let us understand three features of the GI tag. Now the first feature of GI tag is of public property. Now it means that a product which has a GI tag belongs to the producers of the good and it cannot be licensed among other things. The second feature is that it confers legal protection. Now it means that it helps in preventing misuse of labels. So any other turmeric cannot be labeled as Khandamal turmeric if it is not produced there. The third and the last feature is of export marketing. Now a GI tag helps in the popularity of that product and therefore it increases the chance of it being exported to other markets. Now hopefully you have understood the three features of the GI tag. So if a question is asked in your prelims examination, such as what is a GI tag and has the following statements, you would be able to answer. Also, if a question is asked, such as which of the following has a GI tag in India, and one of the options is of Khandamal turmeric, you'd also know that it is correct. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 5. Now let us first understand as to why this is in the news, and then we move on to as to what is the difference between Pslv and Gslv. Now it is in the news because ISRO has launched its 42nd Pslv C40. Now this mission has put 31 satellites into space. Now the primary payload of this mission has been Cartosat 2. Now the purpose of Cartosat 2 is to develop imagery of land and geographical information system applications. Now the third and the last important feature of this mission has been of technology demonstrators. Now this mission is carrying micro and nano satellites. Now these micro and nano satellites have showcased successful miniaturization and therefore has huge commercial application for ISRO. Now hopefully up till here you have understood as to why is it in the news. You've also understood as to the purpose of the primary payload and how technology demonstrator make this an important mission for ISRO. Now we move further as to understand what is the difference between Gslv and Pslv. Now both Pslv and Gslv are satellite launching vehicles. Now both these vehicles have been developed by ISRO or the Indian Space Research Organization. Now the P in Pslv stands for polar and is used to launch polar satellites, while the G in Gslv stands for geosynchronous and is used to launch geosynchronous satellites. Now these polar satellites are mainly used for remote sensing and Earth imaging, while the geosynchronous satellites are mainly used for communication satellites. Now the Pslv launches satellites with low payloads and also in low orbit, while Gslv launches with higher payloads and in higher orbit. Now the Gslv also launches the satellite so that it matches the orbital velocity of the Earth at 3.07 kilometers per second. So if this is the Earth, then the satellite moves in the direction of the Earth at the same speed as the Earth rotates, which is at 3.07 kilometers per second. Now the Pslv engine consists of 4 stages, in which the first and third stage use solid fuel, while the second and fourth stage use liquid fuel. While the Gslv consists of 3 stages. The first stage is of solid fuel, the second stage is of liquid fuel, and the third stage is the cryogenic engine. Now another factor about Pslv is that it was used in the Chandrayaan-1 mission and also in the Mars orbital mission. Now hopefully up till here you have understood from the first point as to what kind of satellites are used by each satellite launch vehicle. You've also understood as the main purpose of those satellites. From the third point, you have understood the difference between the payloads and the orbits. And from the fourth point, you have understood the differences in the engines. So hopefully, if a question is asked in your prelims or in your mains examination in the science and technology section with regards to what is the difference between PSLV or GSLV, you would be able to answer. Now obviously we are not covering as to the difference between polar satellites and geosynchronous satellites, which we might cover in a later section. Now we move on to our next article. Now I've taken this news from page 6, which is the editorial page. Now what this article talks about is the B and Srikrishna committee. And now let me give you an overview about the need for this committee, its mandate, which would be in terms of its aims and objectives. Now let us first start with its background. Now the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology in July of 2017 constituted a 10-member committee headed by the former Supreme Court Judge Justice B. N. Srikrishna. Now this committee released a white paper in November of 2017. Now the committee asked for comments from the general public on this released white paper, and the last date to receive comments was 31st December 2017. Now this committee would also be helped by the earlier AP Shah committee report, and this committee formed a detailed report on the privacy law. Now hopefully up till here you have understood the background of the B and Srikrishna committee. Who is it formed by? Why was it recently in the news? And how is it related to the AP Shah committee? Now let us understand the aims and objectives of this committee. Now the first aim of this committee is to examine issues related to data protection and also recommend methods to address them. Now the second aim or objective of this committee is to draft a data protection law. Now this is the main feature of this committee. Now this is the first time in India that work has started on a specific data protection law. And this data protection law is meant to look at specific details such as data sovereignty, data retention, and the responsibilities of the government, companies, as well as individuals while handling third-party data. Now the third aim of this committee is to ensure growth of the digital economy. And the fourth and the last objective is to keep personal data of citizens secure and protected. And obviously this point has ramifications from the Aadhaar case, also from the right to privacy case. Now hopefully up till here you have understood the aims and objectives of this committee and also what is its important feature. Now let us wait for the final report of this committee to come out, and therefore we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 6 or the editorial page. Now let us understand the focus and the crux of this article, and moreover on how GST and the budget are related, and what is the crux of the article regarding the fiscal deficit. Now let us start with the focus of this article. Now the first point that this article makes is that the Government of India will face difficulty in making estimates for revenue and expenditure in the upcoming budget. Now the question is, why would there be a difficulty in estimates of revenue and expenditure in the upcoming budget? Now according to the article, the difficulty will arise due to the lack of adequate data that pertains to the GST collections. Now to understand this, as you may know, the budget consists of the annual financial statement. Now this shows the estimated receipt and expenditure for the upcoming year and the actual data of the current year. Now GST or the Goods and Services Tax forms a part of the revenue account of the Consolidated Fund of India. Now consider this. So now GST forms a part of the tax revenue and therefore have to be included in the annual financial statement in the actual year, that is this year, and also in the estimates of the next year, basically the budget of 2018-19. And it is here where the problem lies, that the data on the GST is not properly available. And therefore, how would you calculate the actual revenue for this year and the estimated revenue for next year? Now hopefully up till here, you have understood the main focus of this article. You also understand as to why there is difficulty in estimates for the upcoming budget. Moreover, you also understand on how the GST is now related to the annual financial statement and how the inclusion of the GST in the annual financial statement has created a problem regarding the availability of data. Now let us understand the third point that this article talks about. Now the third feature is of the fiscal deficit. Now as you may know, fiscal deficit is the total expenditure of the government minus the total receipts of the government. Now obviously these receipts excludes loans and borrowings. Now the Indian government intends to maintain the fiscal deficit at 3.2% of the GDP. Due to demonetization and GST, GDP numbers of the next year have been revised downwards. And therefore, if the GDP is low, then the fiscal deficit would also be proportionally low. And therefore, the government would have less room to make fiscal adjustments. Now, hopefully, you've also understood the point that the article tries to make on the fiscal deficit. Moreover, you also know how it is related and how low GDP growth is affecting the fiscal deficit. Now, with this, we have covered this editorial, and now we move on to our next article. Now, we have taken this news from page 8. Now, let us first understand as to why the Chahbhar Port is in the news, and then we would focus further on the Chahbhar Port itself. Now, the first reason as to why the Chahbhar Port is in the news, because US may reimpose sanctions on Iran. Now, as you may know, international sanctions led by the P5+1, meaning the permanent 5 members of the United Nations and Germany, had placed sanctions on Iran due to its nuclear weapons program. Now, in 2015, a joint comprehensive plan of action was signed between the P5+1 and Iran, and upon which the sanctions were lifted from Iran. Now, what has happened is that Donald Trump has said that he would reimpose sanctions on Iran because it is not complying with the joint comprehensive plan of action. Now, the second point as to why this is in the news, because India has said that the new sanctions would not affect our investment in the Chahbhar Port. Now, as you may know, India is a major investor in the Chahbhar Port, and in December of 2017, the Chahbhar Port was opened, with India sending a shipment to Afghanistan. Now, the third reason as to why this is in the news is that Japan had said that it would invest in the Chahbhar Port under the Africa Asia Development Fund, but because of the new sanctions, it has slowed down its investment. Now, the fourth and the last point that this article makes is of the future Iranian partnership in the CPEC project. Now, let us understand all of these 4 points and about the Chahbhar Port in depth. And as you may know, it was covered in the December edition of the Focus magazine. So let us analyze it with the help of the Focus article itself. Now, we've taken this from the December edition of the Focus magazine. Now, in the image, this marks the location of the Chahbhar Port. Now, it is located in the Gulf of Oman. Now, it is also Iran's only major oceanic port because it lies beyond the Strait of Hormuz that you could see here in this image. Now, it is Iran's only major oceanic port because it is the only port of Iran that has the direct access to the Indian Ocean, while the rest of Iran's ports are located on the left side of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Chahbhar Port connects to Afghanistan at the Zaranj-Dalram highway. Now, this highway between Zaranj and Dalram has also been made and financed by India. Now, this highway is important because it links the Chahbhar Port with the link road of Afghanistan. Now, this link road connects the major cities of Herat, Kandahar, Kabul, and Mazar-e-Sharif of Afghanistan with the Chahbhar Port. Also, if you remove the ports of Pakistan, Chahbhar Port is the nearest port of India that connects it to Central Asia and to Afghanistan. Now, hopefully up till here, you have understood the geographical location of the Chahbhar Port. Now, in 2003, India and Iran agreed to develop the Chahbhar Port under the New Delhi Declaration, but the development of this port was delayed due to the international sanctions that had been imposed on Iran due to its nuclear weapons program. Now, in 2015, a joint comprehensive plan of action was signed between the P5+1 and Iran, and therefore several sanctions that were imposed on Iran were lifted. Now, soon after the sanctions were lifted, a trilateral agreement was signed between India, Iran, and Afghanistan, which would have the Chahbhar Port link India to Afghanistan. Therefore, the first shipment from India to Afghanistan, which used the Chahbhar Port, was done. Hopefully, up till here, you have understood the geographical location of the Chahbhar Port, and moreover, you have understood the brief background of India's involvement in the Chahbhar Port. Now, to further understand the Chahbhar Port, you can refer to the December edition of the Focus magazine. Now, the Focus article further covers the impact of the Chahbhar Port on the bilateral relations between India and Afghanistan, India and Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and also makes a reference to Japan. Moreover, it gives a comparative study between the Chahbhar Port and the Gwadar Port of Pakistan. Now, with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's paper. Now we move on to the question for today.